We have a compressor station with 24 units, 24 separate compressors that each have a 74 Waukesha engine and an air compressor that are essentially matching gas and doing the compression. And all of those have an L32 compact logic controller. And in the control room, all they have is the, for logging, is the built-in logging that you have with an SE application. And what we had was the operations requested two things. They wanted more storage, because based on the hard drive of that machine, they can only do a 3-month cycle of data. Every 3 months it got overwritten. They wanted more storage capacity, more historization, and they wanted a better way to visualize that data. Because right now, currently they were only visualizing it in the control room. But we needed the asset management team to be able to visualize it, maybe the finance team, other people remotely from this physical site. So we did this in kind of 3 pillars. The first was we had to do an upgrade to the historian and how they historize data. So they had just the desktop class tower machine, which is just doing about 3 months of circular data. So we upgraded that to Historian Server SE, and we used Stratus FD Server, which was mentioned, which was the dual server mount, the rack mount. And that gave us the redundant hardware. So we wanted to reduce that downtime. They had good downtime to begin with, but we wanted to maintain that, if not get better. So we went with Stratus for the FT server, so the redundant hardware. It also had redundant networking. And as he talked about with his plate analogy, it allows us to put a lot of things on that plate, which will, as we can see here. So we have all these servers kind of working on that one piece of hardware. And we can, as he mentioned, if you resource it rightly, which we have, you can add things if you need them down the road. You don't have to go back to the drawing board and redo things. And then also, for the ProSoft gateway, all of these Waukesha engines, the only way you have to get data off of them is with Modbus RTU. So we use the ProSoft gateways for each of those L32E controllers to basically move the data from the engine into that PLC. And then from there, the historian can pick that data up and historize it, just like the rest of the process data.
I can just add one more thing to this. So where Stratus' secret sauce is, and the reason why you would choose this compared to traditional kind of redundant, is that if you did this in the traditional way, what this box is, you'd have another one in that same box right there, and you're making those two machines talk. You're setting up the machine twice, and you're interfacing them and having them communicate. Primary and secondary. Where Stratus is, it acts as one machine. It's active-active, what you just explained with the cruise. It looks like 2 servers. It's acting as one server, so you're setting it up once, and then it's active on that other side without even you seeing it. So you're only setting it up once. You're not setting it up twice and then having them talk.
And the other benefit, so I'm mentioning here, but as when you set up that Stratus, they also have technology built into it that you can bring all that redundancy status information into your HMI. So you can see which one's running, which one's primary, which one's secondary, is there a failure, is there a problem, and you can see that directly. The second part was the control room. So since we moved it from a desktop machine with a monitor and keyboard into a server class hardware, we need to still let the operators have access to that HMI control room. So we added a 6200T, a thin client, which networks into the server and then connects to a monitor so they can, and the keyboard, so they can now interact with their operating system as they did before. And lastly was the cloud infrastructure. So we have all this data on the historian, but now we've got to get it out of the historian and up into the cloud so we can visualize this and have it remotely accessible. So we built our own software using Microsoft.NET and the OSI Pi SDK or API to basically talk to the historian, pull that data out, and send it up to the cloud. And we, at Interflex, we use Microsoft Azure. So we use the data lake for storage to maintain all this data, and we use event hubs for interfacing between us and the cloud. And then in the end, we use our other partner, Microsoft, to use Power BI for visualizing all this data with dashboards and charts and anything that they need to better represent that data for whatever their job function is. And Rob.
That brings us back to our panel session now. So before we open up for questions, Jonathan, I just want to ask, the project's been up and running now for a bit. What are some of the metrics that the end users see? What are some of the key milestones that they've been impressed with so far from the execution side?
Well, so far we've also engaged with another company that's kind of providing some of those dashboards because we kind of farm that out instead of having our team build that. So we've seen a lot of kind of downtime. The main thing was kind of seeing the downtime, if any instrumentation goes down, if any instrumentation is out of spec. And so far we've seen some irregularities, and they've been able to address those much quicker because now they have that data visualized in front of them. So.
So we do have some prepared questions, but I really want to make sure that the audience gets a chance to participate as well. So based on what we've talked through so far, anyone have any questions or any topics you'd like to get to with this group?
I'd be very curious to just hear how you got started on that project. So you had the two objectives, more data over more time and better visualizations. Do you go straight to Rockwell? Do you go to ProSoft? What did starting that look like?
Well, when we were first handed that, I had already kind of been kind of, I guess, very high level looking into the Stratus hardware. And we used to have a guy that worked for us that he moved to Stratus. So we were still talking, he was kind of helping us with that stuff. And it was a few years back, so we were still at Automation Fair, we were looking at the stuff, the demonstrations and all that, so we were very impressed with that. So we kind of leaned towards that for the hardware. You know, we really wanted the hardware to be able to support the existing redundancy they've seen and still kind of move that to the next level, right? So that's kind of where we went for the hardware. And then for the historian, we as a company, we're almost like not exclusive, but we always tend to go towards Rockwell. They're our first pick. Obviously, if customers want something else, we'll do what they want, but we always kind of go there first, and they have their historian solution, right, the server SE, right, and we did many meetings with Rockwell over the features and the benefits and usage and all that stuff, so they were very helpful in kind of explaining to us the benefits and the ups and downs and how to use that very effectively. So that kind of led us just down that path. So that was kind of with Rockwell and as well as our distributor. They were helpful as well.
And one thing to build on, and you said a really interesting thing, which is in the industry a lot, and I think that it's changing, is where customers will come to me, and again, my analogy is that they'll come to me and they've already chosen the big screen television and they ask me to build a house around it. Okay, what can I do? And it comes down to what you said, it comes to the foundation. Okay, you want to put that concrete floor down first, which is the Stratus hardware platform, then you can build what those things are around it. Because so many times I see people, it's a one-trick company. I need a box to do story, I need a box to do SCADA. And you want the one thing to support whatever those is, or build whatever rooms you want in there, paint whatever color, put whatever furniture that you want in there, but have that solid foundation. And to bring those different stakeholders in for that project and get buy-in, so everyone's in agreement of what those things need to be accomplished, and then you all move forward as a team together.
Why did you choose to go the way of creating your own reports on Power BI instead of using PyVision or another historian?
Well, we're already pretty heavily into Microsoft and Power BI. We don't really have any technology currently that uses PyVision. And also, this was really our first, as a company, our first dive into historian. Right, so we don't have anything else with it. This is almost like a one-off kind of thing at first. I mean, we were going to start standardizing, but we hadn't had any experience with that. Right, so we didn't have any PyVision, any of that back-end stuff, any of the supporting technology that goes with the OSI Pi, which is behind the historian. That's why.
Quick question. What's the decision on writing your own custom API to be able to push this data to the cloud instead of using out of the box API to IoT gateway or MQTT or whatever?
So one thing that we learned is that when you deal with historian, they make it super easy to put data in. And if you're not Rockwell, it's really hard to get it out. Like if you're not like a HMI client or something like that, and again, that makes sense, right? It's their ecosystem. So because of that, we didn't really find a good solution that needed what we do, not to just get that out, but to properly interface and format the data that we needed into our cloud. So we really needed to get our hands on that and have ownership of all those protocols and all that data format. That's why. We didn't want to have to rely on somebody else if we had to change things or make updates. So we have, the main thing, like I said, is the ownership of that solution.
Because the source, the data source was the actual database itself, and not, you're not getting from an OPC where, Kepler and all this other kind of stuff. You have APIs that you can use
Yeah, so that tool sits directly on the historian server. So it's not networking to the historian, it's right there where it is. So to reduce that latency of getting that data up into the cloud. Yes, sir.
So I know you talked about multiple facilities. Is this architecture covering data from multiple facilities, bringing that into right order, or is it like a single facility and we're looking to expand to other facilities as well?
This setup is just for this compressor station. We have this one historian to these many units.
Okay.
We're looking at others to do many sites into one historian. But for the scope of this project, it was just this compressor station to this one historian. Back there, sir.
Yeah, I'm glad that actually segue as well. When you talk about moving many sites, and you mentioned, moving things from the edge all the way up to the cloud, and then kind of that pendulum swung a little too far, right? And we're seeing polling times aren't meeting what we need, and that we're not getting what we need there. So the pendulum starting to swing back towards having things closer to the assets. And so I did want to ask, to both your points, kind of what went into that decision? How do you strike that balance between going, whole cloud and things a million miles away, versus having things maybe directly on site, and what the opportunities are to have things consolidated? Because it may not make sense to have this kind of architecture at every single site. So what are the opportunities to kind of consolidate things on either a, geographically, like a citywide, or maybe a regionally, like maybe here in New England, right? How can we consolidate things, and kind of strike a balance? What's been your experience on that field?
I mean, I have my opinion, but I want to hear what you have to say first before I answer, but I have my opinion on what I see the industry doing.
Well, as through our business, right, we see a lot of what other people are doing, right? Because Interflex is an OEM, right? So we see a lot of, through our service department, we see a lot of what other people do and how they do things. So we've seen a lot of people where they have kind of off-site archival, right, and on-site. One of the reasons we went with on-site and used their product is because we wanted to, if something happened and network went down, we're still running, we're still logging. We didn't want to lose that data. We didn't want to have any kind of problem with that. And that was kind of the most driving factor for why we went with an on-premises solution instead of a remote solution for archival and consideration.
I mean, and what I see is like, for example, of the field that I worked in for 8 years, is that they offloaded everything into AWS, okay? And so they had 1 million plus tag historian sitting in AWS that they're polling 3 huge fields at 15-minute intervals. Now they want 1 second data, and we can debate the 1 second resolution over a beer or whatever like that, because I have my opinions on that. Well, we'll just call that 1 second, okay? It's just not as good as cranking up the juice. And then going to something that you said, and something that Rosoft did, what they deal with every day. Everything, like I'm sure at your compressor sites, everything wasn't built in 2018 using 2018 technology, and there's commonality. Everything is all across the board, and by where I work in, like, hey, we acquired this field in 2017 and they used company X, and we acquired this one in 2021 and they used company C. Where edge compute is, it's that commonality point, okay? I'm gonna have varying degrees of I don't know what on that well pad or that compressor site or whatever, depending on when it was made, what the type of software, who was in charge, whatnot, but they're using edge compute and a system similar to theirs for that commonality, okay? I'm converting everything and then I'm having it come out in one-way protocol. Like I do a lot of MQTT stuff, but coming out in that common protocol and kind of going to what you were saying is, why did you choose BI? Well, that's the reason, because they have a smorgasbord of different types of things that are in historian, and they needed a common way to pull it out. No matter if they picked up 20 more locations, it might be a completely different protocol set. But using edge compute and using the applications that are available to us to make those things so it's coming out. And one of the things that we did is a unified namespace. Okay, it's coming out in that one way. So if I go to site A, B, and C, I know that this valve is going to have the same naming convention, so I can put it in the SCADA historian, etc. So.
And the other thing he kind of, I think, alluded to was also the consideration of latency. Like, where do you want the latency to be, high and low, right? If you're on premises, then the latency is super low getting it into the historian, but it's higher getting it out. If it's in the cloud, it takes longer to get it into the historian, but quick to get it out. So we wanted to get it in, again, that was our kind of premise, right? We wanted the security on site. So we had the low latency, and we had to have failures prevented.
Yeah, and that was my question, was, low latency, and I sympathize with you. Necessity of having 1 second hold. But, that's kind of what we're talking about. The low latency on the way in, that's great. And then that can be batched and then come out like much easier later on for dashboards and reporting, right? So you've got the critical on-prem stuff for operations, and you've got financials or whatever, right? That are gonna be much higher latency, doesn't matter data, doesn't matter. But my question is about, finding that balance in terms of not having this architecture on every single site. Where do you feel are the boundaries of, how far can this architecture get stretched geographically? Or how you put boundaries and say, hey, we can't do this much with this architecture anymore. We need to split this up. These are the limits of this architecture. That's my question, is the hardware that you're describing, what are the limits in terms of geography, or however you think of those limits, whether it's tags in, processing, what are those limits as you see it?
Well, I can say that, first of all, as far as the geographic question, right, as I mentioned, this is the Middle East. The Middle East is not as network abundant as, like, say, in the States. Even in some remote places, you still have better network. So you have a lot higher latency just by the nature of where you are, which is another reason we wanted to reduce that latency as much as possible, getting the data collected, right?
I mean, what I'm seeing, and again, I want to hear from ProSoft, is that they're using edge computing to process whatever that 1 second frequency, or maybe even go to milliseconds. It doesn't matter to me. But coming out, because that's where the latencies and getting to the cloud and everything is, I see people leveraging MQTT Spark Plug Feed Report by exception. I'm only telling you when there's a change. That way they can go higher. And then plus two, I've been involved in a lot of some of the EPA and DOT discussions, TSA stuff. And the EPA for a leak, for example, or an event, says you have, right now, it is 15 minutes to identify and 45 minutes to respond, okay? In my experience, and those things probably change. I mean, they change on month-by-month basis, whatever. That's just the last that I remember. But you're not going to, if you're polling at 15 minutes, you're not going to, off one bad poll in data, you're not going to deploy somebody out to a remote area. Okay, I'm going to wait 45 minutes or an hour if it's, like Signet, and it gives you magenta on there. I'm not going to say, oh, at this one, we're rolling. You're going to wait, and that's where, I was like last January, I was in the EPA conference, and I said, what's the sweet spot, guys? They said, if you could identify, if you were doing 60-second polling, and you could identify something in 5 minutes, us as the EPA and DOT would be totally happy, and that would be completely acceptable. And that's where I see the industry is moving, because you can't do all that in the cloud. And that's where, with all of us up here, that's what we're seeing. It's a hybrid. You can't do all of it in the cloud, and I'm not telling you to do all of it in the edge. Okay, it's a hybrid. Okay, do what's appropriate and how you can respond and be most efficient on the edge, and then transport that to the cloud and do the things that you need to do there.
Yeah, I mean, from the ProSoft perspective, our base assumption is that you're using our equipment. We're in the control room, right? You're using us to control the machine. So we don't operate in minutes or seconds. We operate under RPI, basically. We're in the millisecond. So we are an edge device. What we've seen is more requests for people to pull data out of our device, because we're sitting here looking at your Ethernet IP side, and we're looking at your Modbus RTU side. We're kind of the only device that sees everything. And so we're actually starting to see requests and built-in capabilities to take data on sort of a non-real-time basis in order to feed these other applications. So, we are in some way an edge compute device. We do one application and that's it. You can't change it, but we're starting to look at ourselves that way. That, okay, we are an edge device. We run this protocol conversion application, and we're starting to think about how do we take what we already know from that and use that data in ways that customers need beyond just real-time control.
Now, when you're asking me to convert those things, what are some of the common ones that have you spit out?
OPC-UA and QTT. I mean, that's it. That's, you know, for getting to the cloud, those are really the two.
And also circle back to what you said, Andrew, on the data polling by exception, right? Really noting that piece of information when it's relevant to decision making, not just a constant stream. We're seeing more and more industry applications shift to that methodology because, you know, especially in remote applications like in the oil field, you only have a limited bandwidth for communication, and if you're constantly sending known status, you're gonna have a limited bandwidth of what you can actually promote to the whoever's supervising the application. And so by switching to that methodology, you can more quickly identify the issue, get a confirmation of that issue, and then put in place a mitigation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things where I learned this, you know, besides, you know, instrumentation or whatever, is when people want to start putting video cameras, they want to start putting cameras on sets. Okay, and they said, and I had a customer that they put 100 cameras out in the field and they blew out 100 meg cambium line because they were streaming all of San Antonio. And I said, stop, don't do that, because they were about to put up another 250 foot. And it goes to that report, it goes to report by exception. Do the same thing with the IoT devices. But a camera, for example, you have the capability of, I'm looking for a leak, I'm looking for PPE, I'm looking for someone who's on the fence, and you're reporting that by exception. I am not streaming video to a big screen so someone can park there and look at a bunch of video feeds. You want the intelligence to be there and tell you when you need to pay attention to it. That way you can pull that much faster. That way you're not blowing out your communications infrastructure and having to put up more radios and more things, okay? You don't want to do that. That's a never-ending cycle. So that's why with all of us, what you want to do that heavy lifting and those things with that low latency right next to the asset and then report by exception. At least that's what I see a lot with what's occurring right now.
Yeah, so full disclosure, IMQ, we have an MQTT group.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so and you obviously mentioned MQTT. So the best practices that we see in the marketplace is kind of a culmination of all the things that you mentioned. Right? It's basically, the area of the node is decisions that need to be taken right away, right? Where like low latency, especially in oil and gas, where things have to be turned around. Hey, you know, there is an issue, right? You don't want to process that in the cloud and come back and the issue is gone, right? So you want to do some processing on the edge. So you run your edge analytics on the edge. And then whatever exception you have, that's what you want to be able to report. Maybe use MQTT Sparkler to be able to send that exception to the cloud so you can do all the processing.
Yeah, two of my customers, you're actually one of the food items on the Stratus plate for two of my customers. So, no, doing good.
Been upgraded from paper to China.
Yeah. That's what I like to say. You don't want to put a $3 piece of filet on your plate.
So I saw you are running the supervisor on track traffic project. Can you replace that with any other technology?
And so on the ZTC Endurance line, which is our new one, an FT server, it's bare metal. It's where the fault tolerance is hardware based, so you can do whatever hypervisor. I mean, unless it's some weird one, we can do some testing, but you can do whatever hypervisor or however way you want to manage that. The CTC Edge, which is the little box that I showed, we have our own hypervisor, which is called Stratus Redundant Linux, which you do KVM and OVA.
Windows or?
I'm sorry?
The VMs that you run.
I mean, we can run both Linux and Windows, but I don't know.
No, yeah, the top two rows are all Windows Server 2019. And the ones below are there. Oh, I think the FT host is a Linux base.
Yes. Yeah.
And the VTMs I think are too. That's all Stratus proprietary stuff, so we don't get into that. That just comes on the box, and we work with that. So, but ours were all Windows Server 2019.
And what I see out in the field is, for the most part, everyone is moving toward Linux. I'm a fan of Ubuntu. Some people are using Debian out in the field in these remote areas. But like a compressor site, I run a server 2022 in addition to maybe a couple Linux VMs or whatever it may be.
Do you also see any use case of container versus?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I see a lot, and software folks can pick me up on this, but what I do see in the industry when I'm having conversations with end users and we can support containers, they don't, if you can't do it in Docker and container, then they are not going to do it. It's kind of what the future stuff. I mean, they're gonna maintain what they maintain, but you have that full capability within the Stratus. Yeah, no challenges at all, but I see that's, the containerization is the way that it's absolutely.
Really great questions. We have about 8 minutes available in our room today, so please, let's look at any questions. Otherwise, we go to Marcus. So we covered a lot of really great ground. One topic we touched a bit on cloud versus on-prem, but how does security play in that role, right? Obviously, production data is very sensitive data. Jonathan, what were some of the things that you implemented on the project to make sure that data is secure, whether it's on-prem or through the cloud?
Yeah, that was a big consideration because obviously the historian has to be on the internet to send that data up. Right, so we talked about different ways because Rockwell has a number of security compliances to facilitate that. But in the end, as we were working with our IT department, we always lean on that kind of stuff more with IT than kind of with us because they have kind of the experience and SME and all that those good things. So basically, between if you go back to the first page, yeah. So basically, right in here, in this internet section right there, that's all kind of a black box around that, where ingress and outgress is controlled by our IT department. Right. So they have the firewalls, they have anything else that they need. Because they actually have a lot of sites that they deal with this stuff, right? Not just ours. They have a lot of other sites, Middle East, domestic, international. But they've already done these things. They have standard operations, standard procedures, standard hardware, right? And they just put their stamp on what we have. So it is controlled, it is monitored, it is protected, but it's just not by the automation team.
And what I see is that the industry is moving toward a lot of, instead of security being its own separate little box, because I see a lot of customers have the industry was a little box in themselves to death, as it's moving toward that they want to be able to virtualize that. I want to be able to have one or two hardware platforms I'm supporting, 1 or 2 boxes I have to have on the truck, and I can virtualize all those applications. And that's what I see a lot of the industry moving to and actually implementing out in the field. I would say in the last 12 months, I'm going to see, I want to see the way what the industry looks like on these platforms and how they're handling edge. Not in 12 months, but in 24 months. I think in 2 years to be able to look back and say this is where the industry went. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen in 12 months because there's still a lot of companies that are planning on this. I mean, your organization is way ahead of it. Is one of the ones ahead of the curve in looking at it this way in the fault tolerant type platforms and such.
Are there any off-the-shelf kind of cybersecurity solutions that we can just import and dump into a virtual machine
Yeah.
that's compatible with Rockwell solutions?
Yes, yeah, there is. I would say the Rockwell compatible solutions are by far, 80% of the stuff that I do is driven by a Rockwell type application and is in that ecosystem. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
You may have already touched upon it, but based on this experience, are there any do's and don'ts that you realize based on how this project went that you applied for future projects?
No, I think overall, there was some minor stuff, but overall, I think it was a good experience. As far as both the Rockwell technology, the Stratus hardware, the ProSoft data interchanges, I think all those really went off. I'm going to say just without a hitch. Again, we had experience with the low-level stuff, with the ProSoft, right? With other Rockwell technologies, how they work, how they function, right? So we had a lot of that experience. So just kind of adding this up on top, we found it was really a good experience. So there weren't really a lot of don'ts. So.
The only the challenge that I see kind of on the high level is, I started out my career as an IT guy and then became an OT guy. And this is the first time I've seen OT and IT actually start to try and play together in a common platform compared to say, this is my stuff, this is your stuff, and we're not going to talk to you about it. I think that now with edge computing and virtualization and such, it's becoming the common, that is becoming the common playground of where OT gets their things, IT gets what their things are, and we're meeting in the middle, and we're actually starting to collaborate, at least in why I've been in the industry for 23 years. It's the closest I've seen to, hey, we're actually sitting down and talking about these things by the running our seven corners.
Yeah, I think, not on this project, but the one don't to watch out for is when you're doing protocols, really on the machine network, just be careful about your performance. Like I said, you know, whether you're doing it here or not, somebody's going to eventually decide they want to control those engines from the PLC, and they're going to expect that box to do more than just, you know, historian level data. So, you know, there's plenty of small box solutions out there that do protocols, but they're really targeting just the kind of information area. You start pushing them on, you know, on performance, and they're just not there. So.
Yeah, I just add to the last part about optimization that we do is when you're building these networks, communication protocols, the switches that you use to do all this data transfer are really hard too, and configuring them correctly. You know, you mentioned the video over IP before. If you don't set up your communication protocols, that can easily overwhelm all of your communications on the machine. So by using quality of service measures and metrics to make sure that your control data, your safety data, production data always have priority, that can mitigate a lot of those errors when someone down the road says, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had that camera out there line over line, or wouldn't it be great if we had those sensors over there we would get live feedback on. So just, you know, standardized practices, best industry practices from out of the gate can really help mitigate any future problems. So with that, we are right on time with our session. We probably have time for one more question.
One question was growth of gateway, is it hardware only or you can also do software?
Today, it's hardware. Don't read anything into my smile about that. No, obviously it's, as I mentioned, we're thinking of ourselves now as edge devices, right? And, you know, we can't call ourselves an edge compute because we only do the thing we do, but that's really what it is. So, you know, kind of making the step to virtualizing these kind of applications makes a ton of sense. The one thing, like I said, is we always assume our boxes are going into mission critical control type applications. So we're building the next generation focused on making sure we still maintain that, you know, that performance, even as we start to think about virtualizing the capability in some of that. So, good question.
Well, thank you all for joining our session. Please enjoy the rest of your